we have got Syria. There was a regime change in Syria back in December. Bashar al-Assad, a rather infamous dictator who had Russian backing, was run out of Syria. And if you remember anything from a couple months ago, I was pretty loud and clear. I said, hey, we need to be careful what we're doing here. Like this could be like Assad, far from a good guy, but we don't know what we're getting into if we topple him. And of course, these so-called rebels that were overthrowing the Assad regime over in Syria were Islamic extremists that were being funded by the United States. Now, we did this in Iraq. We did this in Libya. We tried this in Syria previously. We did this in Egypt. And every time it just destabilized the region. It's like we don't learn. In fact, I don't think it's that we don't learn. I think we know exactly what we're doing. I think the military-industrial complex and these folks that are pulling the strings understand that if they can continue to keep these regions unstable, they'll be able to continue to keep funding both sides of the arming and profiting off of both sides of the conflict. So they have a direct incentive to see these extremist groups seize power in some of these countries. Again, these dictators are brutal, nasty guys, but they are nothing compared to the people who take over in these regions. Now, the guy who was, this guy, Ahmad al-Shara, is the leader of the group. This is a guy who this just sums up American foreign policy. We were funding this guy and this entire group to go over there and overthrow Assad's regime in Syria because the Russians backed it, while we simultaneously had this guy's name on a hit list. We had a bounty out for him. This was under the Biden administration. It was started under the Obama administration, where we were trying to destabilize Syria. And it's like we don't think when we do these things. We just think, oh, the Russians support this guy, so we're going to support the opposite. Anything to get a leg up on the Russians, even if maybe the Russians have the right idea for what's right for that region. We don't do it with any consideration for the people that are in these areas that are going to have to live under these new leaders. We just roll with the punches and say, we gotta hurt the Russians at all costs, even if it leads to total chaos and an even worse group taking over. And it's not like there's no precedent for that. We have quite the track record of taking down so-called bad dictators and worse groups moving in and taking over. Like I said, like you had in Iraq, like you had in Afghanistan, like you had in Libya, like you are seeing right now in Syria, like you had in Egypt. The list goes on and on. Now, so here's what it says here. It says, Syria is currently experiencing, this is ChatGPT, makes a great intern. I just had it summarize all the different articles for me, and here we go. Syria is currently experiencing significant upheaval following the rise of President Ahmad al-Shara, leader of the Islamic group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, who assumed power after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime. The transition has been marked by escalating sectarian violence, particularly affecting minority communities, especially Christians. In recent days, a violent crackdown by the new government in the Alawite region resulted in over 1,000 deaths, including 745 civilians. Where are you guys at? Pronouns for Palestine. Watermelon Gang, where are you guys at for this one? Or do you only freak out when you're pointed in a direction? That's the only time you get upset. You've been awful quiet when it's the Muslims doing the killing. Huh. Weird. It's almost like you don't really care all that much about killing, and you don't care all that much about innocent people. You just use what's going on in Israel, which I've been very critical of the Israeli government, by the way, but you use what's going on in Israel as an excuse for you to hate Jews. That's kind of how it feels like with a lot of these college campus protests that you're seeing. Since the clashes involved Islamist-linked security forces and fighters loyal to the ousted president, raising concerns about the new administration's commitment to inclusive governance. And that's another thing. They promised that because that's so when Biden gave these guys weapons and money, Mia, you're not going to believe it. So Biden met with this guy. I mean, didn't meet directly with him, but was in contact with this guy who the U.S. also had a warrant out for his arrest that we had a bounty for, and said, okay, we'll give you weapons and money because we've never been bit in the ass by this before, by like when we funded this guy named Osama bin Laden to fight the Russians. But we'll give you weapons and money to overthrow this regime, but you have to promise us radical Islamic extremists that you're going to be a more moderate government when you take over. And he said, absolutely, President Biden, we will be so much more fair, so much more moderate. We're not going to discriminate against non-Muslims. We're not going to go after Shiite Muslims, nothing like that. We promise we will be far less radical than the last time we did this. And Biden said, okay, here's a couple $1 billion, some RPGs, some bombs, and some machine guns and ammunition. Anything else you need from us? And he said, we'll let you know. Well, as it turns out, they haven't been all that moderate. Said the violence has led to mass evacuations of Alawites and Christians, with some seeking refuge, get this, at a Russian military base. So the big bad Russians that I'm supposed to hate are protecting Christian refugees who are being executed by the savage, radical Islamic extremist regime that the United States government under President Joe Biden put into place. What am I missing here? What are we missing? Says historically, during the Syrian civil war, Christian communities faced persecution from various factions, including extremist groups like the Islamic State. Additionally, the Islamic State systematically persecuted Christian minorities in regions under its control, leading to mass displacement and atrocities. But we don't hear about that. We only hear about it when it's the Palestinians. Not that I'm okay with a lot of the stuff that's happened to the Palestinians, but we only hear about it when it's happening to other groups. Have you guys noticed this? Anytime something bad happens to Christians, it is ignored. It's ignored. Any other group, it's a national or international tragedy. The global community, the United Nations, everybody comes together and they say, we have to stop this. The mainstream media freaks out. Everyone blows it up. October 7th in Israel, all the Palestine, the Gaza Strip bombings. Those are Jews and Muslims that those two things happen to. And we got to throw a fit about it, which we should. Those things are atrocities in their own right. But when the same thing, if not arguably worse, happens to Christians, it's radio silence. It's radio silence because the secular anti-God media understands that if they target the one true religion, or excuse me, they're so harsh on Christianity because they know that's the one true religion. That's the reason they're so hard on us and they let the Muslims and Jews go. It really is. Says the current situation under President al-Shara's rule has exacerbated fears among Christian communities. Reports indicate that sectarian violence persists, with Christians being targeted in the ongoing conflict between government forces and Assad loyalists. The instability has prompted many Christians to flee their homes, seeking safety amid the escalating violence. So this is a video of Donald Trump from 2015 on this Assad situation. On the money. Look what Donald Trump says here.
So I've watched Assad, and I've watched a little bit on the other side. The problem is the other side of Assad, we have no idea who they are. They probably are ISIS. I'm saying, are we better off with Assad? We have no idea who these people are. We give them weapons, we give them ammunition, we give them everything. Aaron, we have no idea who, I mean, maybe it's worse than Assad. So what are we doing? Why are we involved? We have to get rid of ISIS, very importantly. But I look at Assad, and Assad, to me, looks better than the other side. And, you know, this has happened before. We back a certain side, and that side turns out to be a total catastrophe. Russia likes Assad seemingly a lot. Let them worry about ISIS. Let them fight it out.
Huh. Hell of a concept. Hell of a concept. Two concepts right there. Number one, that maybe Assad was better than what was waiting in the wings for when he inevitably collapsed in there. And number two, maybe if Russia's so worried about Syria, we should let them fight these extremist groups and stop getting American troops killed for bullshit wars. I can't imagine why the deep state and the intelligence agencies and the military-industrial complex wouldn't want this guy in charge. Odd. That's a little strange. Now, here's another guy who is incredibly slept on, in my opinion, but I also believe he is truly, and I'm not kidding here, truly one of the greatest minds in American politics. And I wish more people would pay attention to what he says. This is another guy who said something a little similar on the Syrian crisis right when the Assad regime fell in December. Go ahead and check out what this guy had to say. Because as bad as Assad was, the people that are taken over will behead women if they learn how to read or show their faces in public. They will throw gays off of roofs. They molest little boys. They're monsters. They're going to execute. I've told you the second this happened, I tweeted it. When Assad's regime fell in Syria and the United States funded it, the United States signed the death warrant for every Christian and Jew in the country. If you're a Christian or Jew in the country, you got probably till the end of the weekend to get the fuck out of there before it becomes open season on you. Because, yeah, while Assad might have been a bad dude, he wasn't going to genocide Christians and Jews. Assad was Muslim, but the Muslims that have taken over are more radical extremists. Now, they claim to be more moderate, because so that's what got the U.S. on board to keep funding them. Was the head of this radical Islamic terror organization, who's a former Al-Qaeda member with ties to ISIS and funded by the Taliban, said, okay, when I get power, I'll be more moderate. Now, we can totally trust him, because we've never been burned before on this. Like when we funded ISIS to take over in Iraq, or we funded this guy named Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. We've never been burned on this before. They're already on video shooting Christians in the back of the head over in Syria within 2 days of taking the capital. And we funded this. We funded this. We took a guy who we knew was a bad guy, that had never done anything other than be a bad guy, and his group of rabid, radical extremists, and we said, here you go. Here's money and weapons. Yeah, sure, we know you're going to exterminate a third of the country the second you take office, but go ahead. If it's points against the Russians, that's all that matters. Because that's, again, American foreign policy in a nutshell. I don't know about you, but it's like that guy can see the future or something. What do you think, Mia? I mean, that guy, that's impressive.
I don't know who that other guy is, but he's pretty handsome.
He's a good-looking guy. I agree. He is a real good-looking guy, and he's never once... The best thing about him is, despite getting so many of his predictions right, I mean, we're talking north of 90%, he's never once claimed to have psychic powers or be some type of messiah or prophet or anything like that. He's never claimed that. He's just been able to identify patterns and tell you what's going to happen next. It didn't take a rocket scientist to see what I said, to see what I predicted was coming. And it only took 3 months for it to come to fruition to the degree it is now. I mean, it's been going on, but over the last week, we have had just outright massacres of Christians, hundreds of people in a day, getting mowed down by these radical Islamic extremist groups, and absolute crickets from the media. I take no pleasure in being right in this. I wish I would have been wrong. I really do. But I knew it was coming. I knew this was going to happen. It was so obvious to anyone with eyes who understands how Middle Eastern politics work. You have a bad guy gets toppled, worst guy replaces him. Every single fucking time without exception. That is how it always works over there. The United States destabilizes the region, and these people in American politics, they're not stupid. They know what they're doing. A rational person could come to the conclusion that after you destabilize 3 or 4 different countries, you'd start to figure out that, hey, this doesn't work. We should change it up. Obviously, they've got some other type of angle here. Obviously, they want to see the chaos. They want to see the death. They want to see the human rights violations. Why? I don't know. Probably because they're making money off of it. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. If you can think of another reason why the powers that be in this country consistently destabilize regions and get Christians, Jews, women, and gays massacred at the rates they do, I'm all ears. But to me, it seems like all these people that are getting, and Sunni Muslims as well, because there's different types of Muslims. But it seems to me that all these people that they're getting massacred by these extremist groups are collateral damage in their path to profit and power. And that's a crying shame. I mean, I'm dead serious. The Obama administration started this bullshit. They funded it. And then they made sure that it got seen through to the end, to its inevitable conclusion under the Biden administration. You saw it. The money and weapons stopped flowing as freely for a couple of years under Trump, and then Biden ramped it back up. You saw this. We knew this was coming. And they saw it through to its inevitable conclusion, which was a genocide of Christians in Syria. I'm sorry. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Anthony Blinken need to be tried for war crimes because that's what this is. They're accessories to heinous war crimes, not just in Syria, all over the world. I mean, we're funding a genocide in Yemen, a genocide by radical Islamic extremists in Yemen. Over and over and over again. And that's a harsh reality that some of you need to wake up to because you've been lied to in your history classes. The U.S. ain't always the good guys. In a lot of the cases, especially in Middle Eastern politics, there are no good guys. And when there are no good guys, sometimes it's best to just stay the hell out of it. If there's two jackasses that want to fight each other at the bar and you don't like either of them, maybe it's not a good idea for you to pick one side because they're both going to go to jail tonight. So maybe you should just stay out of that one. And you're going to get drug into it, and you're going to get in trouble, and it's going to be all this unnecessary stress for you. So maybe just stay out of it. But that is something that you guys need to that a lot of you need to come to terms with, which is that we are not the good guys. I'm not talking about you and me. I'm talking about our government. I'm talking about the people. I'm not talking about like individual soldiers or anything like that. Those people are heroes. They should be treated as such. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people that pull the strings within the military industrial complex. I'm talking about a lot of our politicians that create these unstable environments intentionally, whether it be for money or power. We're not the good guys at a lot of the places we have a foothold or we have a footprint in throughout the world. That doesn't mean the other guys are the good guys, but we're certainly not the good guys. I mean, you can't fund war crimes against people all over the world and claim moral high ground on anything. I refuse to believe it. So now, here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. If we raise enough of a stink over this, one of two things will happen. We're going to send money to another rebel group to fight the current rebel group in Syria that's overthrown Bashar al-Assad's regime. And we're going to hope for the best, in which case we will essentially be funding a rebel group to fight a rebel group that we funded. Or we can do the smart thing and we can cut this group off and we can say, Russia, we fucked up. Your guy wasn't great. Go in there and get him. Because the Russians they're defending the Christians over there. You're having Russian troops get into full-blown firefights with Islamic extremists over there. I hate to break it to you. Again, there's no good and bad guys here. The Russians are better than us in this Syrian conflict right now because they're the ones who aren't funding the active genocide against Christians. It is what it is. Tough pill to swallow, princess. You better get over it, though. This is, we're not going to play the video of the guy talking, but we are going to play this other video here of what they're doing to the Christians and what they're subjecting them to over in Syria, because I think some of you guys need to see this to drive the point home. Go ahead. We're not going to play the whole thing because we'll get kicked off YouTube, but go ahead and play some of it.
Covering my face
next
now.
one. So they have them crawling like dogs and barking across the hot sand. Hey, scroll up. Go, get off that. It was about to show a murder, and we can't do that, or we'll get kicked off of YouTube. But that's what they're doing. If you're a Christian too, you should be pissed off about this because that's what they're subjecting your people to. That's what it is. I mean, listen, and you can call me a xenophobe or an Islamophobe or whatever you want. Here's the reality, man. There have been Christian nations all over the world. There have been Jewish nations all over the world. There have been Hindu and Buddhist nations all over the world, Sikh nations. Only one religion, when it seizes power in a country or a region or whatever the case may be, only one religion turns everything it touches to shit. Look no further than what's going on in Europe. Muhammad was the #1 name for babies in England a couple years ago. The British crime rates, poverty rates, you name it, have gone through the roof. And that's all over Europe. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people think that the Islamic aggression stopped with the Ottoman Empire in World War I. That's not the truth. That's not the case. They took a break, but what you're witnessing right now in both the Middle East and Europe and Canada and soon to be America, if we don't watch our back, is a continuation of that aggression in the form of a soft crusade. That's what's going on in Europe right now. A soft crusade. Because here's what you guys don't understand is the crusades get a bad rap. And I'm not going to say there weren't atrocities committed by Christians during the crusades. The crusades get a bad rap. But the reality of the situation is the crusades were a response to hundreds of years of Islamic aggression after the Muslim empires had taken multiple Christian cities through violent force, occupied them and enslaved them. In fact, many Christians prior to the First Crusade were being kidnapped. White European Christians were being kidnapped from Europe, taken back to Africa and the Middle East, and sold into vicious, brutal slavery. Oh, yeah, that happens both ways, guys. It's bad no matter who it happens to. So the Crusades, the Pope essentially said, okay, I need everybody with a sword and shield to get together. We have got to stop this. We are going to go take our lands back. And while they didn't necessarily take the lands back, they did stop the Islamic aggression in its tracks so it wasn't able to continue up into Europe. I can go on a whole spiel about Vlad the Impaler and how he was very misunderstood and actually played a key role in saving Orthodox Christianity, but I'm not. That'll be a whole different show. I'm not going to talk about that. But so, or should I talk about it? Mia, should I talk about Vlad the Impaler? My man crush.
If you want to.
Because he's complicated like me. We'll talk about him for a minute. Vlad the Impaler, inspiration for Dracula. If you've heard of Vlad you probably don't know the real story about this guy. Vlad the Impaler. Everyone here, you hear about him. They talk about him. He was this psycho serial killer and a tyrant. And he was far from a saint. I'm not going to pretend he was a good guy. But as we've learned on this show often, sometimes it takes a bad man to keep the wolves at bay. So Vlad the Impaler was taken into slavery by the Turks in the Muslim Empire and sexually assaulted, brutally beaten, just treated horribly as a young boy. His brother was killed in slavery by Muslim forces. He manages to escape, returns back to his hometown in Romania, seizes his father's throne in, I forget the name of the city. It was the largest city there. Basically, this city was the gateway for the Islamic Empire to basically march up and down Europe and burn the Eastern Orthodox Church to the ground. So Vlad the Impaler understands he's outnumbered, wins a battle, and captures 20,000 of the Ottomans' troops. And he knows that the war drums are coming. And they're coming for his city. And he knows they're outnumbered, and they're not going to win. So he goes, okay, we're outmanned. They got more supplies than us, more weapons than us. We're going to lose this fight. But we're not going to surrender, because if we surrender, all of Eastern Europe will fall, and the Eastern Orthodox Church with it will fall to Islam. So Vlad the Impaler said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to scare the living shit out of the enemy. We're going to do everything we can to make them think twice about coming through us. So he took the 20,000 hostages he had, and this is where he gets his nickname, got a bunch of 10-foot tall wooden stakes, drove them through the genitals, up through the throat of these guys, so out their mouth, and put all 20,000 of these hostages on these stakes. That's where he got his name. He created a forest that was 2.5 miles deep in front of his city for the Muslims to march through. They got there. They took one look at it. Some of them turned around right there, didn't even go in. They tried to go through it about halfway through. They went, this ain't worth it. We may win this, but the juice ain't going to be worth the squeeze here. We're done. Scared the living shit out of them. You couldn't even see the sky. It was blacked out by so many bodies that were impaled through these stakes. He put the fear of God or Allah into them, and they turned around and said, fuck this, this ain't for us. Vlad the Impaler, not a great guy, likely saved the Eastern Orthodox Church. That's the reality there. So sometimes they lied, and again, perfect example. They lie to you about Christians because they want you to hate your own religion. Now, I'm not saying that guy was a great dude, but he did what needed to be done. If he didn't do that, they were going to get steamrolled. And I tell you what, it might have been barbaric, but there was a whole lot worse of shit waiting for them if the Muslims made it through that city. That's all there was to it, man. That's all there was to it. And, yeah. I mean, I don't know what else I can say. Mia, do you have anything you want to add?
No.
No? Super fun, cheery lead topic for us this week, though, isn't it? I love when we can talk about lighthearted subject matters, you know? Like religious genocide. It's fun times over here on that space.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, be sure to click the link in the description to get the full episode on Rumble. If you prefer to listen along, you could actually get us on Spotify, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio. You can also go to www.outlawstreamers.com to learn more about not just my show, but tons of other great shows and all the exciting projects they have coming up. Follow my socials at Caleb Isn't Funny on Twitter and Instagram, at Caleb Salvatore Comedy on the Chinese Spy app that is TikTok, and be sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks, and we'll see you every Saturday for brand new episodes of That's Based. Peace.